I want to accept the breakup like a real man. I'm asking for a divorce. I never realized that 4 little words could destroy the whole world around me. Unfortunately, my soon-to-be ex-wife said those words so easily. My wife said those words without any hesitation. She was ordering a regular menu item. There was no ceremony, no last meal. At least she was thoughtful. She gathered all my things and was waiting for me as soon as I crossed the threshold. My name is Steve Miller, and my wife is Julie. We are both just over 40, and our 2 children, Josh and Emily, are in college and don't live at home. My wife looks even better than the day we got married. Despite having gained weight from having kids, she married me. She has a rigorous workout regimen which has allowed her to shed unwanted weight and stay in optimal condition. Unfortunately, I haven't been so lucky. Some men get a distinguished look as they get older, but I have a bald spot, a belly canopy, and a goatee with graying hair which hide my double chin. My silence must have been her cue to keep twisting the knife. Steve, it's not that I don't love you, I'm not attracted to you. We've grown apart over the last few years. Now that the kids are out of the house, there's no reason for us to continue this charade. When we first got married, there were 3 of us at the altar: Julie, me, and our unborn child. Emily was unplanned, but she was our favorite child. I gave up my dream of going to college to become someone better. I became a laborer, taking any job I could find to put. I was always moving from one job to another, just trying to put food on the table. Josh came along 2 years later, and since Julie wanted to stay home, I had to work twice as hard to make sure we had everything we needed for our growing family. 10 years ago, I stopped jumping from one dead-end job to another to secure my family's financial future. 10 years ago, I earned an online degree while working 40 to 50 hours a week. It was tough, but I made it work. I still took classes, but I made that sacrifice because I knew my family depended on me. Julie was a stay-at-home mom. I was a stay-at-home dad, raising the kids and going to parent-teacher conferences. I didn't cheat on my wife in the 10 years we were together. I had the chance to go out and party, but I didn't. I kept all the money I made for our family. Being a counselor is feast or famine. Some months you've got clients, but other times you wonder if you'll be able to put food on the table. That's just the logical side of me talking. The emotional side loves my wife. So the idea of even flirting with the idea of an affair goes against every fiber of my being. No, I'm married to my job, with my wife being a stay-at-home mom. I was working a lot. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I want my kids to have the best of everything. I worked 40 hours a week plus all my travel time. I was away a lot. I was the very definition of a road warrior. I could be in New York City one half of the week and San Diego the next. I missed a lot of family events, but it wasn't by choice. If I could have been home to see my kids graduate from 8th grade or even high school, I would have. However, college is another thing. It's expensive, and money doesn't grow on trees. It's not because I love my job. I'm a human resources consultant. I help organizations right-size their staff. Administration loved our lean processes and cost savings. I always encourage the organization to reinvest those savings back into their employees. Unfortunately, management doesn't always view their employees as assets. They see them as costs and expenses that need to be cut. I can certainly put on rose-colored glasses and believe I'm doing everyone good. I wear rose-tinted glasses and believe I am doing everyone good. After all, I know I'll be impacting the lives of families wherever I go. For example, a single mother worked for an organization as a data processor. She spent most of her time printing reports and storing them in folders at the end of the week. My research showed that no one was reading them, so I simply didn't print the reports. I not only eliminated paper costs and reduced the cost of shredding services, but I also saved the company money. But she lost her job. I really hated that part of the job, but I always found the strength to carry on, knowing that my wife and family loved me and needed me. I could have quit my job and found one that didn't require a lot of travel, but that would have meant a big pay cut. A lot of my arguments with Julie were about money and financial issues. The kids needed her to be home to drive them around, and for other reasons why she shouldn't work full-time. They also needed the latest smartphones with data plans, the latest fashion trends, the biggest houses, rental cars, and any other material possessions that were necessary to make their quality of life just perfect. I tried to breathe life back into our marriage, but it was 20 years. Can't we try? Do you really want to pay someone to handle our divorce? Don't make this any harder than it already is. Her smile usually made me melt, but it was full of daggers. Think of it this way, we can start over while we're still young, and I felt completely helpless. I don't know how I managed to resist. I wanted to fall to my knees and beg my Rock of Gibraltar, my North Star, not to leave me. Julie, I can quit my job. I can find something locally. We can try to make it work. I know I haven't been here. I don't like being on the road all the time, but we had something once. We just need to rekindle that flame. My pleas and unwillingness to accept what she thought was inevitable began to weigh on her. Steve, you're starting to sound like a wuss. A real man accepts his fate and deals with it. Her betrayal really got to him. When we were young, and all my friends wanted to go to a party, or even just hang out, my call to duty was always to be a real man and accept my fate. I had a responsibility to my wife and children. I needed to grow up fast. Julia always made love to me as a reward for being a man and not a reckless boy. I'm sure my wife said something when she found her voice, but I wasn't listening anymore. I just picked up the suitcases she had packed for me, walked out to my car and drove away. Julie was crying and pounding on the car. On the windshield, she was begging me to stop and apologizing. Before today, I would have seen those tears and done everything I could to comfort her and make those tears disappear. But I called them a woman's tears, crocodile tears, for a reason. I found myself going to some Irish pub that all my friends were raving about on Facebook. I'd never had the opportunity to visit. It was a strange and quiet place, somewhere you could drink away your misery and not be disturbed for hours. There you are, a woman's voice interrupted my deep philosophical discussion. I was looking up at the sound of the woman's voice and noticed that several hours had passed. Heather Wilson, my personal assistant, had found a seat next to me at the bar. She told me that my daughter was worried and had tried calling me a dozen times when she couldn't reach me. She called me and paused for a moment to take my hand. Fortunately, it was the same hand that held my whiskey glass. She told me what had happened, and I'm so sorry. I shifted my gaze from my glass to my phone, and indeed there had been a lot of missed calls from. I shook my head and said, I'm not in the mood to hear how right this is, and there it is. I looked into my amber reflection and thought, karma really is a real dumbass. All those people whose lives I've spent these years living have finally gotten their cosmic comeuppance. Justice, my family was right to evaluate my role as a husband and father. Why don't you get a hotel room and get some sleep? Maybe things will be different in the morning. I don't know what's worse, the fact that I hate and want to hurt the woman I love, or the fact that I hate myself for wanting to hurt her. I love her so much, or maybe it's the fact that I hate myself for wanting to hurt the woman I love. Heather got me out of the bar and into the hotel. I didn't even touch it. I went to that bar with the intention of drowning my sorrows. Unfortunately, I don't like to drink, and I certainly can't stand the taste of Southern comfort. Sleep didn't come easily. All the work and lack of entertainment makes me a dull boy. Eventually, sleep came the next day, but it brought its own form of terror. I tried to face my wife and talk to her at the table. Heather was insistent that our 20-year marriage was worth saving. Unfortunately, she wasn't home. I knew Julie was the only other person who could have been there. I didn't want to make a scene, but I needed to talk to her. She owed me that much. As I entered the gym, I immediately saw my wife, but she didn't notice me. She looked incredible. The sports bra she wore was tight around her breasts, showing off her breasts' fullness. The cropped cut showed off her tan and toned legs. The yoga pants hugged every curve of her body, showing off her well. Her ass was perfectly molded, and she seemed to be in good spirits. She looked like she hadn't missed a beat. Hey, buddy. Don't stare at that beautiful piece of ass unless you're Tweedledoom or Tweedledick. You're not going anywhere near this woman. Believe me, I've tried. I'm a muscular guy, but I don't have a neck. The man pointed to something that looked like a walking mass of muscle with a head attached to it. He grabbed my wife's ass and lifted her with ease. She wrapped her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck and began discussing something. It's Tweedledoom, all muscle and no brain, my newfound friend explained. However, he apparently has all the right muscles in all the right places for that ass. The tone of my voice only spurred my friend on. He seemed to want to make my mood even worse. Behind him was Tweedledick. As soon as Tweedledoom lowered my wife to the ground, she walked over to the other guy. Unlike the embrace she shared with Doom, Julie had only one leg around the man's waist while his arm supported her thigh and ass. His hands moved with the feel of something. They were clearly familiar with each other, and more importantly, they shared a long kiss. They should probably get a room, the guy next to me said with a smirk. It was becoming clear that my wife's separation wasn't the only reason for my divorce. My alpha male instincts wanted to rush right in and get my wife back. However, my more logical side realized that my alpha male instincts would be crushed by both of these guys. The guy would be crushed physically by both of these Neanderthals, and neither of them would break a sweat for a brief moment. Part of me wanted to feel the physical pain so that the emotional pain would be more complete. Oh, there's her boy. When it rains, it pours. I hoped my son would stand up for his dad and defend his honor. I hoped he would. I didn't want my son to be offended by his mother's behavior like this. It wasn't because I wanted him to fight for me, but because he needed to see that these people were tearing his family apart. He didn't see it, though. My son didn't like team sports when he was younger. He was ridiculed in school for dropping passes, missing baskets, or knocking the ball away during a game when he said he was going to start wrestling and weightlifting. I was proud of him. He had my competitive spirit, and I thought he was overcoming those jerks at school by becoming this chiseled, handsome guy, based on the advice I gave him on the phone. Now I see that Tweedledoom and Tweedledick probably influenced his decision by being his surrogate fathers. I just needed my daughter to show up so my family's betrayal would be complete. I walked out the door. What was the point of a fight I'd already lost? I didn't even know there had been a battle. The gods must have known about the fool karma had given me, as I started the car and the chorus from Fleetwood Mac's Woman of 1,000 Curses came on the radio. So, did she make you cry, break down, or shatter your illusions of love? Now, tell me, is it over? Do you know how to pick up the pieces and go home? It's been 2 years since my divorce. Maybe I was having a midlife crisis, or maybe I was just a selfish fool who didn't want to give up the single woman lifestyle I had created while my ex-husband was away working long, hard hours to support his family. My husband was away working long, hard hours to support his family. The divorce went as smoothly as could be expected. I got the house and all the equity in it, and he got his pension and airline miles. The only thing I really didn't expect was that when I tried to file for spousal support, his attorney brought in pictures of my fidelity to prove it, not just with Rick, but Rick and Ed. Even worse, he managed to take pictures of Rick and Ed groping me in front of my son. How did he get those? I don't know. Steve was a gentleman. He didn't want to change the dissolution of his marriage from irreconcilable differences to adultery. He just didn't want to pay his cheating ex alimony. That was my lover's responsibility. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm sure that's what he was thinking. The judge was also thinking the same thing. Steve continued to pay his children's college expenses while they were in school. Since Emily was 20 and Josh was 18, he didn't have to pay child support. At first glance, my life was lonely when Steve got his degree. Steve started working as a human resources counselor, which meant he was away from home during the week, but home at weekends. Those were the good times when things were slow. He stayed home, but he was on a roll. It felt like every dollar spent was another complaint or another screaming match between me and him. Thankfully, I had kids, but they always needed me to take them to practice, or take them shopping, or take them to friends' houses. If they weren't busy after school, they were home, and like all kids, they wanted to be both mother and father. I felt pressured. I have to say I resented Steve being away so often. But when he was home, he was the best husband anyone could ask for. He did all the little things I needed done without me even having to ask, and paid for them if he couldn't do it himself. He always sent flowers on important days, my birthday, our anniversary, Valentine's Day, and even the day we met. He always called to cheer me up when I was down. Having Skype was great, so the kids and I could always see him when he called. He may not have been home, but he was always there. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough for me. At least, it wasn't at the time. Steve encouraged me to join a gym. At first, I was angry with him. Was he insinuating that I was fat? He was always eating fast food on those business trips. How dare he suggest I go to the gym to lose weight? However, he explained his reasoning. He must have realized that I had very little adult contact and that I was losing myself in the role of mother. Steve understood me so well. No wonder he ended up in human resources. He's good with people. Part of me wished I could be as insightful as he is. Maybe I wouldn't be where I am today if I had been smarter. The baby fat didn't come off at first. Going to the gym was a chore. All the women there were so pretty and fit. I felt like a cow being led to the slaughter. Maybe I was their class project, or maybe I was just another piece of fresh meat. Whatever the case, Rick and Ed took me under their wing and helped me develop a strength training plan. At first, I thought Rick and Ed were they were gym rats trying to help someone who was struggling. I fully expected them to dump me for the younger girls once I got the hang of it. When the weight started to drop and stay off, they shared my excitement. I wanted to share it with Steve. I proudly showed off my new body to my husband over Skype, but he seemed so melancholy and so darn depressed. He was grateful and supportive in every way he could, but you could tell from his voice that he was depressed. It got to the point where I hated calling him. I didn't want to hear about his bad. I'd spent the week with Rick and Ed, who were both in great shape, so when Steve came home looking a bit rough and unwell, I wasn't in the mood for him. I did my best to be a good wife, but I'm sure the Academy would have given me an Oscar a few times for some of my performances. Looking back, I realized that if I'd known how much his job was affecting him, or how my indifference to his emotional well-being was hurting him, things might have been different. I think if I'd been more aware of how his job was affecting him, things might have been different. But I was lost in my own world, and it didn't help that Rick became Rick. He was a work of art, and probably went back in time so Michael Ang could use his body as a model for a statue of David. I guess Rick took advantage of my vulnerability. When my husband left, I was seduced by Rick. Body was nothing more than a schoolgirl fantasy. The fact that he wanted to be with me intensified that feeling. It wasn't a one-night stand. Rick was constantly watching me, whether it was in the women's locker room at the gym, the men's locker room at the gym, or at my house. When the kids were away, Rick was always attracted to me. There were times when we couldn't even get to my house, and we'd stop somewhere and have sex. I felt alive again. I felt young and wild and free. That's something I hadn't felt since I married Steve. Well, Ed must have known about our relationship and acted like a jerk. Like a little kid, Rick encouraged me to be nicer to his friend. Being nice meant exposing me to Ed. Each of them had their own reason for wanting sex, but as I look back, neither of them wanted to cuddle afterwards. If I could, I'd go back in time and give myself a talking to. "You should have seen the flowers delivered to Sammy," exclaimed one of my colleagues. I have to laugh when I think about it. The whole time I was married to Steve, he always wanted me to get a job so I could provide extra income. He complained about his job and how he wished he was doing something else. I was such a fool to tell him to go for it and stop whining about my job. Now that we're divorced, I work 40 hours as a clerk in a billing office, instead of telling him to stop whining. I should have told him to take out his frustration at the gym. It's one of the few things that helps me relax after. The other asked in a teasing tone, "A long work week from her mystery lover?" I didn't like Sammy, not because of anything she did, but because she was 10 years younger and had a tight little body. She was the kind of girl who knows she's attractive, but doesn't flaunt it. By not flaunting it, she just waves it in your face, showing that she's gorgeous while you get older. I'm sure she laughs insanely, knowing that I have to work twice as hard at the gym to maintain what I have, while she gets those heart-shaped boxes filled with chocolate and shares them with all her co-workers. She shares her goodies with all her colleagues. I've got her figured out. She doesn't eat a bite, but she makes all the women around her fatter so she can look so much better. I couldn't resist starting to dig in. Why haven't we seen this supposed Romeo? All we see is you in these pictures. I'm sure everyone in the room feels the same. I could hear my envy, especially with that bouquet of roses in a crystal vase on her desk every weekend. Sammy and her boyfriend always seem to be traveling somewhere or doing something exciting. She has pictures of her kayaking the Cumberland River or standing under a waterfall at Burgess Falls State Park. If they're not doing nature, she's going to a concert at the Grand Ole Opry or hanging out on the Lower Broad listening to live music. Sammy playfully parries ever so gently, deflecting my attack. He just doesn't like being in front of the camera. He's self-conscious. He's conscious about his appearance, which I don't know why I'm surprised about. I mean, okay, he's bald, but he's bald by choice. I couldn't help but laugh cynically, but she just carried on. Combine that with his goatee and trim body, and a blush covers her, a rose on a long stem. Helen exclaimed, "Late to the party as usual." As usual, the woman gasped at every sweet gesture. Sammy, a smug, nosy fool, nodded her head as she read. The card that came with the roses said he had something special for me tonight, and he invited you all to come along if you wanted to. He's rented the 3rd floor of Merchant's Restaurant on Lower Broad. You're all welcome to bring a partner, and this dinner will be paid for, so we're finally going to meet this mystery man of yours. Just know that he's all mine, Sammy. In a possessive tone, she replied, "Not unless one of us steals it." A voice came from behind. I don't know who it was, maybe Carrie or Beth. They dropped their underpants faster than the French dropped their rifles. For dessert, because he knew how much I loved strawberry jam cake, Rick would tell me off for dabbling in the frosting because it was greasy. Not to mention, Rick couldn't afford dinner at Watermark. I'd finally get a chance to show the big guy what a real dinner was, so I called him as soon as I got back to my table. "Rick, one of the girls is having some kind of party at Merchant's tonight. Her boyfriend has rented the 3rd floor and dinner will be catered. Would you like to come with me?" Oh, sorry, babe. I got my ATV out today. I'm going to work on it. Why don't you come over and give me a massage? I'm sure it'll help me heal. He thinks about going to the gym and then coming home for another workout under the blanket if he's lucky. We can go to the Longhorn if you want. I can watch him eat a piece of beef in less than 15 minutes. Come on, Rick. We won't have to stay long. You can meet my friends, and we can finally have a nice dinner with dishes and everything. Please, can't you do that for me just once? Why don't you ask your son to come with you? I'm sure Josh would love to meet your friends. I'm sure he means Carrie and Beth because I always tell him they look like cheaters in professional clothes. I think they look like they're cheating in their professional clothes. I'm also pretty sure it was meant as a veiled insult. You know full well that my son is in jail for not paying child support. You are such a jerk sometimes. I slammed my phone down in anger. His comments about my son really hurt. Josh was in jail for failing to keep up with his child support payments. Josh treated his women badly. Rick and Ed treated their partners the same way. They had sex with them until they got bored and then left them. The girls often showed up on his doorstep pregnant. The boy couldn't hold down a job or use contraception. Those were traits he'd picked up from Rick and Ed. I would have asked Emily to come with me. We hadn't spoken since the divorce was final. She understood my point of view, but felt I wasn't trying to make amends. She didn't like either Rick or Ed. She felt uncomfortable around them, and felt like they were always undressing her with their eyes. I intended to go to dinner alone. Who knows what the evening might bring? Exiting the elevator on the third floor, I almost bumped into a man who looked like he could be a Marlboro Man. He was fit, but not as muscular as Rick or Ed. He had a rugged look, was bald, and wore a goatee that made him look like a cowboy. At first glance, I thought he was Sammy's boyfriend, but when I looked into his eyes, I realized who he was. Her personal Steve Miller. Never in my life had I felt so embarrassed and humiliated. Not because of Steve's actions, but because of my own. Here was a very attractive cowboy, who had once been my husband, and whom I had humiliated repeatedly. Well, he certainly remembered Julie. The awkward moment certainly didn't go unnoticed by either of us. Steve, you look how have things been going for you lately? I was feeling a bit nervous. I was trying to make small talk, but deep down I was hoping that maybe Steve was just here as a friend of a friend or something. Maybe I could just forget about the mistake and move on. People deserve a second chance, right? He looked down at himself and then looked up again with his usual smile. I wish I could kiss him again. His hugs and kisses were the best. He made you feel like you were the only girl in the world. I took his hugs for granted. Things have changed for me. I'm no longer a consultant. I'm now the CEO and president of a staffing agency here in town. I don't have to travel, so I have plenty of time to go hiking and just relax to enjoy nature. He gave his stomach a pat and said he'd worked out that stomach, but look at you. You look as good as ever. I love spending countless hours at the gym, but as I said those words, I immediately wanted to take them back. I didn't want him to remember my gym time and my time with Rick and Ed. I could hit myself over the head with a piece of wood right now, maybe. I just thought he looked around quickly. I know he wanted to know if I was with someone, but Steve took it all in stride. So, what brought you here? A date? Steve laughed a little and nodded. You could say that he patted the pocket of his sports jacket where I noticed a small bulge. I had no doubt that the bulge was about the same size as the small black velvet box that held the engagement ring. I invited her friends and family over for dinner so they could join in with the celebrations. I had so much I wanted to say, so much I wanted to give back and try to get back the husband I had lost. However, the time for figuring things out was 2 years ago, when I told him I wanted a divorce. I can't tell if my tears were tears of self-pity or tears of sadness. Pity or tears of happiness for him? He deserved to be happy after I left him. My silence must have been his cue to continue. Julie, I had no idea you'd be here. Please know that tonight you're not. I quickly interrupted him. I know, Steve. I'm happy for you. Sammy is a very happy girl. My voice started to break. I whispered an apology and I went to the ladies' room to try to pull myself together. I heard soft music playing. It was a bittersweet song sung by Roxette. Listen to your heart when it calls to you. Listen to your heart. There's nothing more you can do. I don't know where you're going or why. But first, listen to your heart. Say goodbye to it. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thanks.